On March 23, 2011, a prominent Boston rabbi, Joseph Pollack, traveled to South Sudan to witness the emancipation of 175 slaves, and to share with them how his people, the Jews, celebrate their own redemption from bondage.
I have come here to teach you how the Jewish people remember their slavery.
Pollack's visit comes at a historic moment for South Sudanese who just voted to secede from the North and will declare independence on July 9th. Jews were slaves thousands of years ago in Egypt along the Nile. Today, blacks are still enslaved only a few hundred miles south in Sudan, Africa's largest country. In the 4th century, Sudan was a Christian country, part of the Byzantine Empire. That changed with the Arab-Muslim conquests and forced conversions in the 7th century. For over 1,000 years, the Arab-Muslim North dominated and oppressed the black African Christians, animists, and Muslims living in the South, Darfur, Nuba Mountains, and other regions of Sudan. When the South rebelled, the regime in Khartoum sent Arab militias to destroy African villages. As compensation, the marauders were allowed to loot the property and capture the villagers, women, and children as slaves. Brought to the north, the boys were usually forced to look after the cattle, and the girls became concubines. Some estimate that up to 200,000 blacks, mostly from the Dinka tribe, fell victim to Arab slavery. An indigenous peace agreement between the Dinka and their neighboring Arab herdsmen provided a way for freeing some slaves. The Arabs needed Dinka wetlands for their cattle, and in exchange for grazing rights would travel north and retrieve the slaves. In the 1990s, under the leadership of the heroic slave liberator John Eibner, Christian Solidarity International, CSI, a human rights organization that helps persecuted Christians in Sudan, Pakistan, and Iraq, amplified this underground railroad, first with cash incentives, then with hard-to-acquire cow vaccine. In the past 2 decades, CSI liberated some 100,000 slaves, providing them with essential first aid. Dr. Charles Jacobs, the head of CSI's partner organization, the American Anti-Slavery Group, AASG, traveled several times to Sudan to document the CSI's missions. At the request of a philanthropist, Jacobs invited Rabbi Pollack, who heads the Hillel House at Boston University, to teach the slaves the Jewish custom of remembering slavery during Passover.
They remember it by singing, they remember it by telling the story, and they remember it by eating something together.
As usual with CSI liberations, slave retrievers assembled soon-to-be-freed captives under a vast shade tree. After CSI documented the story of each slave, Jacobs and the rabbi interviewed some of them. The heartbreaking experiences of Ayok and Ahol reflect those of tens of thousands of other slaves freed by the CSI. Ayok was only 7 years old when the Arab horsemen attacked her village in Abyei. She saw the men being shot or slaughtered with machetes, and the women being raped. Her Arab master Muhammad Ali renamed her Alima and tried to cut her genitals. At the age of 11, he gave Ayok away to one of his friends to be his wife. At the time of the interview, Ayok was pregnant with her master's child. Ahol was a slave for 21 years. She was forcibly converted to Islam, raped and repeatedly beaten with a club for as little as not bringing the water fast enough for her master, who called her Jangai, the racist Arabic equivalent for the N-word. The rabbi told the slaves he was there to share his people's story. The Jews, he told them, were enslaved thousands of years ago in Egypt. God heard their cries and saw their tears and set them free. Today, God heard the cries of the Sudanese slaves.
God heard your cries, and His representatives, the people who came to get you, the people who paid to get you out, are God's messengers. And this is a new day, and you must be a very special people, because God listened to your cries.
And as the slaves were given matzah, wine, and hard-boiled eggs, all part of the Jewish commemoration of freedom, the rabbi led them in the traditional Passover song Dayenu, which means, "It would have been enough if he set you free." Dayenu, it would have been enough if he brought you to a new freed nation. The AASG and CSI are working with South Sudan's leaders to establish a yearly commemoration for their freedom from slavery.
The most important thing that you can do for your new nation is to tell your children the story of your slavery. That's what we do. We call together the whole family, not in the church, but in the home, and we talk about the slavery.
American Anti-Slavery Group has pledged to work with CSI on liberating the estimated tens of thousands of slaves left in the North. And as you or your Jewish friends and neighbors celebrate Passover, remember that for $109, you can help free one slave, also providing him or her the aid imperative for their survival. Donations are tax deductible. To learn more, visit iabolish.org.